Hi and welcome to the Pangea podcast. My name is Jonas Tesfu, and with me I have a person I admire a lot. This is an expert on African diaspora. Personally, I call him Wikipedia of the African diaspora. Extremely knowledgeable, and been really looking forward to having this conversation. With me I have Dr. Shem Ochuodho. Welcome, Dr. Shem.
Thank you, Jonas. Delighted to be here.
A pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting me today.
Thank you. All right, so let's just get started. You work with something called Kenya Diaspora Alliance. What is that?
Kenya Diaspora Alliance is a federation of 47 diaspora associations across the world with a combined nominal membership of 250,000 Kenyans. The 47 literally are found in every corner of the globe, every continent largely, and they vary from social to communal to welfare to business clubs to circles, as we call them, and some are political as well. So yes, that's what the Kenya Diaspora Alliance is. Some call it an umbrella body for Kenya diasporas, but we prefer to call it a federation because 250,000 is only about 10% of the estimated 3 million Kenyans abroad.
So this is over 3 million Kenyans abroad?
That's right. Actually, Ministry of Labour estimates it now to be 4 million, but unverified.
Wow. Do you know where most of the Kenyan diaspora are? Where in the world do Kenyan live if they leave Kenya?
Good question, Jonas. The problem is it's all estimated because a diaspora census has never been done. According to the World Bank, the majority of the 3 million are in the US, 600,000, 300,000 in the UK, 200,000 in Canada, 100,000 in UAE, that's United Arab Emirates, 80,000 in South Sudan and South Africa. This was data of about 4 years ago. Of course, in South Sudan, there have been incidences that have reduced the number of Kenyans or foreigners, so to speak, in that country. So that's roughly from World Bank. The International Organization of Migration also believes, at least at that time, about 4 years ago, there were about 3 million Kenyans outside the country. According to them, the majority were indeed in Africa. 100,000 in Uganda, 100,000 in Tanzania, 80,000 in South Sudan, and 80,000 in South Africa. So roughly that's the distribution of the Kenyan diaspora across the globe.
Okay, thank you for that. And for listeners, you obviously hear that Dr. Shem knows a lot about this topic. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about who is Dr. Shem and how long have you been working with the African diaspora? Okay,
I have been engaged with the African diaspora matters for 12 years. But I've been involved in Kenya diaspora matters for a little over 30 years. When I was a graduate student, a doctoral student in the UK, and a postdoctoral student in the US. That was early 90s. So that's how long I've been involved with the Kenya's diaspora.
So this is what, over 30 years then?
Yeah, over 30 years, over 3 decades. Yeah. And I've seen some growth happen. Not as fast as we would have loved to see, but still commendable enough. Obviously, diaspora is the gold mine, not just for Kenya, but for Africa. I recall in the early days, it wasn't possible to connect when technology wasn't there. But we have happened to be part of the very initial IT, information technology students, as it was called then. And at the rise of internet, in the early 90s, it was possible for Kenyans across the world to connect. So actually, it all started with 6 IT students, 3 in the US at MIT, 1 in Finland, 1 in Canada, and then I was then in the UK. So that was the start of what later became KenyaNet, later Kenya Community Abroad, and a number of organizations in 2010 came together to constitute the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. That's where we are.
I see. Thank you for that. Is the diaspora Africa's secret weapon when it comes to driving change?
Absolutely. I believe it is, Jonas, because it's become the major donor for Africa, so to speak.
How much does Kenya get in remittances?
Okay, Kenya gets roughly $3 billion, 300 billion Kenya shillings, roughly. In 2021, it got $3.5 billion, according to Central Bank of Kenya statistics. So this is quite something major. And I should say for Kenya, it's the revenues, the income is the highest foreign exchange earner, more than what we get from the three leading agricultural exports, which are tea, horticulture, and coffee. All combined bring $2.4 billion in a good year. And 3 times what we get from tourism, which is $1 billion a year. And I dare say that's what we get in a good year from tourism and so on. And because of the pandemic, COVID, incomes from agriculture and tourism have all plummeted. On the other hand, diaspora remittances have gone up.
Yeah, because it increased with almost 20%, right, in 2021.
Rather surprisingly. So we had to establish why this happened.
Yeah. You know?
Well, I don't know, but I could guess. I've seen in the past when the economy was stressed, when there was insecurity, growth of insecurity threat, you'd find Kenyans send more money to support their families. So that's the interesting thing about remittances. When there's a problem, there seems to be, of course, usually the economy suffers. You find instead of buying a packet of maize meal, we call it unga, for maybe 60 shillings, you find the price has doubled, 120 shillings. So if you have to keep your parents going, you have to double what you send. My suspicion, that's the reason. But also I think there's the recognition that with the global threat or growth of nationalism, that eventually people return to where they belong. So it's good to invest for a rainy day. So some diasporas are probably sending back money home as investments.
I see. One of the ambitions of KDA and also from Pangea is to double the remittances.
Right.
So if Kenyans are sending, say, 3.5 billion or 3.7 billion.
Right.
So how do we get there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. I should mention that KDA with partners, government at the 2 levels, national and devolved levels, as well as corporates, private sector, and partners like Pangea and others. We, for the past 9 years, we've been holding annual diaspora homecoming conventions. When we had the first one in 2014, diasporas were remitting about $1 billion per year, and we set a target. We said, what can we, within the next 5 years, that's by 2019, double the remittances? To our pleasant surprise, it had surpassed the double. We were talking of 2.8 billion then. So the new target, of course, which we co-share, is we'd like to see the remittances double to $6 billion by the year 2030. But also the amount, currently the fraction going into investments is very small, only 25%. So the bulk majority, 75%, goes into family consumption. We are keen to see that also grow from 25 to 30%, so that more goes into hard savings and investments.
Yeah, I fully agree.
But how to do that, I think, is a conjecture, something that we have to explore. One of it is probably to create attractive investment vehicles so that the incentives, we incentivize diaspora send more back money home, not only for upkeep, but also for investments.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And that's also one of the ambitions we have, right?
Absolutely.
Developing, vehicles and tools that would enable the Kenyan diaspora to do investments. And I think one thing that, being from the Eritrean diaspora, something that's been bothering me a lot, because in Eritrea, remittances is almost 40% of GDP.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, but the thing is, we only support family members. Nobody's supporting the smartest kid in the village who can create jobs and employ everybody else. So even as we're sending it, it's very like we're not always putting the money where it can help the country develop further, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It would be nice to pump it into the economy so that it kind of accelerates economic growth.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I didn't know the percentage is so high in Eritrea. I think almost akin to what goes on in Lesotho, Swaziland, and Cape Verde, where it's about 15 to 30% of the GDP from the remittances. So it's quite key to a number of African countries.
Oh yeah, 100%. But one thing I'm wondering about, because I see a lot of opportunities with the diaspora, but I don't always think that the different African countries are utilizing the diaspora as they should. I mean, let me give you an example. Kenya, for example, is borrowing a lot of money from China for infrastructure projects.
Right.
Why don't the Kenyan government, for example, create a diaspora bond and then enable, because if you have over 3 billion coming from the diaspora, maybe you can finance some of this infrastructure project using that funding. Or am I thinking too far out here?
You're so right. If my estimation is correct, to write off the loan for the standard gauge rail, for example, you're probably talking about $10 billion, 1 trillion Kenya shillings roughly. And over a 3-year period, theoretically, if all the money diaspora bring into the country was to go towards that, they would take over, buy off the loan.
Yep.
So basically, there are infrastructure projects that diaspora could finance. And the SGR is probably our biggest infrastructure project. So yes, you're right. There's quite a bit of infrastructure that diaspora could finance. And with permission, I should say that in Africa, diaspora pump a whooping $80 billion in total, which is about double all overseas development assistance Africa receives per year, and also about double on average all foreign direct investment that Africa receives on average, at least in the past 10 years per year. So clearly, of course, the bulk of that goes into the big in the league, with Egypt getting 30 billion, Nigeria 25 billion, Morocco 9 billion, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Ghana $3 to $5 billion each.
Yeah.
So it's quite significant, and this is happening. It's like wild grass, wild plants. We are not watering it.
Yeah.
So if we did water it, it could be much more.
I like this. Let's water it, huh?
Sure.
For someone that is from the diaspora, like you, and also with connections,
right?
When it comes to investment, what would make you excited enough about a project to invest in it?
Good question, Jonas. But one more that you will allow me to bring in. I spent a bit of time last night with somebody, a Pan-Africanist I respect a lot, Honorable Madam Abike Dabiri. She's from Nigeria. The Nigerians call her Mama Diaspora, in part because when he was a member of parliament, she kept talking, what about diaspora? What about diaspora? And I think President Buhari did appoint her chair and CEO of NIDCOM. NIDCOM is the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. As we, they were visiting Nairobi as part of the UNEP at 50 summit, and as the president's advisor on diaspora matters. She's very passionate about some of what the Nigerian diasporas are doing and could do if the environment was made more attractive for them to invest. But one thing that we're talking about was, look, at the moment, our union, that's the African Union, is largely externally funded. And we're saying, for heaven's sake, the diasporas, the Africa's diaspora, could, in good measure, finance this. And we're not just talking of what we call the contemporary diasporas. That's Eritreans in Canada, or Kenyans in Finland, or Nigerians in Fiji. But they're also what we call the historical diasporas. So these are the Caribbeans, the Afro-Americans, Afro-Europeans, and so on and so forth. Those whose parents and grandparents were involuntarily taken away from us 400 years ago to across Atlantic, and 600 years ago to the Gulf area. The African American alone has a spending capacity of $1.2 trillion. That's quite significant. And part of that could get its way into Africa. I'm not even talking about the Brazilians yet. It's believed that outside Africa, the highest number of Africans are in Brazil. Yep. So there's quite huge potential here for Africa to tap. So you're right. In terms of being the game changer here, I call diasporas, Africa's diaspora, the sleeping giant, the gold mine we are yet to tap.
Yeah.
In terms of what would make them invest more and even remit more, one is to mainstream them. They need to feel belonging. I often use the example of the Filipino diaspora. It's estimated there are 10 million outside the country, and they take a whooping $40 billion every year. If I was to compare that with the Kenyan diaspora, which is, let's take 3 million, it's about a third. They should be pumping into Kenya about $10 billion every year, 10 to 12 billion per year. So we shouldn't even be talking of just 3 billion. Meaning, if the circumstances were the same and the incentives were in place like the Philippine government gives to diasporas, there's no reason why we would surpass that target of doubling the remittance to 6 billion even before 2030. So yes, an incentive is a major one consideration. There's the issue of lack of trust. The trust deficit is big. For the Kenyan diaspora, many have told sob stories of sending money even to relatives or families, and then they get conned. People are sent photos of nice buildings being constructed, but when they land, they realize that this was somebody else's parcel or property. So there has been a bit of that, and this is why we have been working with a number of what we call preferred realtors or real estate companies that are credible, and also diaspora remittance banks of choice. We're working with about half a dozen tier 1 and tier 2 commercial banks. And the idea is, can we restore the confidence so that usually the companies that KDA recommends the diasporas to invest with, and this is why a trusted partner like Pangea, backed with a big brother or sister, if I may, of the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, then we're likely to give that believable Kenya Diaspora Investment Vehicle. And obviously we hope ultimately we transcend it to an African Diaspora Investment Vehicle to attract more investments.
I like what you're saying. So starting off with Kenya, creating investment vehicle, onboarding Kenyans, building trust, and once you get the momentum, scale it and into other countries and sharing. I really like what you're saying. Are we as a African diaspora community, are we good at learning from each other? Like, does Kenya learn from, I don't know, Philippines or from Nigeria, or is there any kind of like, hey, this strategy helped us get $1 billion more from the diaspora? Oh, wow, let me copy your game book. Do we have any of that?
Good.
Or is it silos?
Well, good question. Africa's diasporas has her own challenges, and I'll mention in a moment, if you permit. But in terms of learning from experiences, I'm glad a number of development partners seem to have realized we need to get innovative finance, the new ways of funding development sustainably in line with the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, also in line with Africa Union's Agenda 2063, not to mention Kenya's own Vision 2030. So obviously, how are we going to finance them? We must look for new ways of affordable capital. In this regard, in addition to SIDA, and I should say the EU, European Union, a number of countries have been involved in these domains. The Germans, GIZ, for example, we have a program called We Do Africa, where KD has a partnership with the GIZ, with the project. And the idea is, how do we support what we call mama mboga. Mama mboga are micro traders, women and youth-led enterprises, leveraging remittances like matching funds, whereby benefactors initially in 7 EU countries of, if I can remember, Germany, France, Netherlands, Switzerland, Norway, Austria, and they send the matching funds to micro enterprises who themselves are mentored and coached by certified trainees, GIZ trainers. And then they get matching granting funds, which grow over a period of time. So the idea is, how do we leverage and learn from? I'd want to believe that there are other countries, maybe notably places like India, China, Korea, and so on, which have largely grown through inputs from their diasporas, financially, one, but even more importantly, through human capital, knowledge, and skill.
Interesting.
But coming to the challenges, yes. At the moment, Africa's and by extension Kenya's diasporas are a little bit scattered. In the initial days, we were thinking of how do we unite all Kenyan diaspora, these 3 million. But we realized that because they are so diverse with different backgrounds, some very high level, others unskilled workers. So it's a whole range in different cultures and experiences and interests and professions. It was practically not possible to get everybody on board. However, it's important to get those who are like-minded, and that's how we got the 250,000 through their associations, and the numbers grow. Just in the past 1 month ago, 2, one from France and the other from US, have just joined from Michigan. We have also 2 lined up, one from Australia, the other from Canada, that are in the process of concluding their affiliation to KDA. There's usually a process. So it's important ultimately. But I must also say, and we were sharing with the NIDCOM chair, in 2 weeks we'll be hosting the Director General of Ethiopian Diaspora Agency in Nairobi. She did say about 2 months ago they hosted the same. I think the DG, the Director General, is going around trying to find what are some of the best practices. I think it's one of the ways to share and learn experiences and benchmark. So that's commendable and needs to be encouraged. For Kenya Diaspora Alliance, we've also hosted in the past and interacted with a number of what some call diaspora umbrella bodies. That needs to be encouraged. And this, I should say, is what led to the formation of the Africa Diaspora Alliance. The idea is, can we have a platform that brings pseudo-umbrella bodies like KDA and others? Rwanda Diaspora Global Network, NIDO, the Nigerians, the Ethiopian diasporas, the UNA, the Uganda and North America Alliance, and so on, that can bring them together so that we have some structured way both to engage government as well as the private sector and diasporas themselves.
Okay, I hear you. Makes a lot of sense. So there's a bit of coordination and organization as part of the mobilization aspect. Right. All right, let me jump to the last question here.
Sure.
Been working within this space for the past 30 years.
Right.
Which country do you reckon to be the best when it comes to involving the diaspora? Is it like the Philippines, as you mentioned, or maybe it's India?
Okay.
Or is there some, is it Kenya maybe? What's your thoughts here?
Good question.
Israel is also a diaspora.
I know, the Jewish.
Yeah.
The Jewish. And the other is Ireland.
Yeah, in the US and stuff, right? Boston is like
and
Irish.
If my recollection is right, it's probably the one country where its citizens outside the country are way more than those at home. It's estimated there are 4 million at home, while 70 million outside the country. Yeah. So really, then the diasporas are the go-to. But yes, the Jewish experience is worth emulating. It's normally hard to say which one is best, but there are indicators I would recommend to be used. One is what organizational structures, that's very key, have government put in place to coordinate or liaise with the diasporas. our recommendation as KDA usually is a dedicated Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. So in that regard, India scores highly because apart from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is separate, they have the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. Other countries which have similar are Georgia. Nigeria used to have the same. So the lady, Honorable Abike, that I'm talking about, the commission she had previously was a full-fledged ministry. So, but apart from that, there are also countries now that have split functionalities. They have ministries of foreign and diaspora affairs.
Okay.
And this is increasingly very common within Francophone Africa, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, and so on and so forth. Now, the beauty of that, and this is a recommendation we have made also for the Kenya government, we do know that the constitution limits the number of ministries the president can create. But we think diaspora is so important that it merits being a ministry on its own, because coordinating these Kenyans across the globe, and not only Kenyans, we're talking also of the historical diasporas who are keen to invest in Africa, say through Kenya, through Konza City, their ad as one of the good platforms. The tech space is a major area of interest. So to that extent, it would merit having a full-fledged ministry. But in the event that can't happen, renaming foreign to be foreign and diaspora affairs would be good, because at the moment, foreign affairs has got 16 functions listed, and diaspora is the last one, it's the 16th. It's down there. In Swahili, we say in kule chini. It's the one real down. So by the time the Honorable CS Minister deals with the issues of diasporas, she's really tired. To give diaspora the deserving priority, and again I should say, Kenya Diaspora Alliance and other diaspora formations have been fighting over the decades for the government to establish a diaspora directorate. So one was established about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, even though we have a director, somebody very able, Harry Ndoma, Madam Harry Ndoma, she reports to another director before she gets the permanent secretary. We think diaspora agency or directorate needs to be headed at the very minimum by a principal stroke permanent secretary level to give it the deserving mandate and give it sufficient budget. So in that regard, one measure would be the structure that are put in place. It should not only be at the national government. In fact, it should percolate the entire government. It would be nice. Every ministry has a focal point for diaspora. KD is currently working with the Net Fund. One of the targets is how do we grow 2 billion trees by the end of the year, and I think 1% of them to be done by diasporas. That same could happen with literally every ministry you can think of, health, education, and all the rest. But also at county levels, we've just concluded an MOU with the Kakamega County government, which we'll be signing in course of the month. And we have similar with 2-3 other counties. And our plan is by end of the year to be working with about 8 county governments. So each of the county governments needs to have a diaspora system, at least a liaison office. But also major corporations, I think the banks are leading the way in this regard. Nearly all the major banks now have diaspora banking department, which is the way to go. So yes, improving the structure that exists is one. The other major one would be the incentives that diasporas give. I may mention lastly, in 2016, in collaboration with the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, KDA, we undertook a survey of Kenyan diasporas, probably the first and to the best of my knowledge, only major survey that has taken place over a 1-year period for Kenya diasporas. And we're looking at, one of the questions was asking the diasporas, if Kenya government today said, tell us just one most important thing if we did for you would make you feel belonging, what would that be? Very interesting answers were given, Jonas. About 6% of the responses, I'll take the 3 leading responses. 6% said, we want our investments in Kenya protected. The security of investments we already talked about. 8% said, we don't want to pay petty bribes to public service. Of course, 3 major things holding Kenya back: impunity, in order of priority for me, impunity, ukabila, which is tribalism and nepotism, and lastly, graft, corruption. So that's a major concern to the diasporas. So improving governance would attract more diasporas. So 8% said we don't want to pay petty bribes. But the highest number, 52% of the respondents said we want to be able to elect our leaders.
Yeah, to vote.
So, correct, to vote and also run for office.
Yeah.
Currently, there are impediments, there are inhibitions. So, for example, dual citizens are not allowed to hold public office. We remember there was a bit of drama, our current ambassador to Korea, where Parliament said no, unless she renounces her American citizenship, she can't be our ambassador. So there are all those obstacles that diaspora still face. Some of them may require constitutional amendments, but others, even with the constitution as it is, we still need to do more to make them attractive. So in a nutshell, those are some of the parameters we use to gauge which best countries. Coming back to then the question, I think some countries have done pretty well. In terms of representation, I think probably France has got the highest out of 300, parliament of 300, house of 300 members, 12 are diaspora representatives. Similar Iraq, strangely enough, about 11 members of parliament diasporas. But Algeria and Cape Verde have 6 seats of members of parliament reserved for diasporas. Mozambique and South Africa have 2. So the ANC main party in South Africa, in its constitution, 2 of the candidates are from the diasporas. So there are those good examples in different respects.
I hear you.
Right.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, you really touch based on that this is a multi-layer discussion, right? Because we started off talking about investment and these things,
Right.
but then also looking at parliamentary seats,
Right.
government.
Sure.
Personally, I feel like the little wish that I have is actually like, I wish I could take over a diaspora ministry affairs
Right.
for a year
I know.
and just pave the way. Because I feel like,
Right.
excuse my French here, but
Right.
government is not being really so smart when it looks at
Right.
utilizing the diaspora, right?
Sure.
And even if you see that India gets more than all of the African continent and they have a clear strategy,
Right.
there's very few looking into that and copying the game books, or the fact that,
Right.
being in Eritrean diaspora, the Eritrean government had never asked me of anything. I mean, they're happy to take the money as I send to people,
Right. Right.
but I can contribute a lot more than money.
Absolutely.
But that invitation is not coming,
Right.
which is very strange in the sense that we are not really utilizing the resources we have, right?
Right.
Why is this?
I hear you, Jonas. One of our senior members in Brussels keeps saying, he calls them those guys. Those guys are just interested in our money, not in us.
Yeah.
They're interested in just remittances, but not remitters,
Yeah.
not those who send the money.
Yeah.
Because you need to be interested in those who send the money as well. We have a saying vernacular that if you want to milk a great cow well, feed it well. So even the diasporas, if we want to get more out of them, let's make them feel belonging. That's why in Philippines, for example, when diasporas go back home at the airport of arrival, there's this big board. In Swahili, it's Karibu Nyumbani, welcome home.
Yeah.
Until recently, Kenyans returning home, it's like Africans were being discriminated everywhere. You go to the developed world, at the international airports arrival, you're really frustrated on the queue at immigration desk and so on and so forth. You would come back to Kenya, for example, until a few years ago. You would see the other races very easily walk in, but then the Kenyans would really be frustrated on the queues. Well, until recently, and I must compliment the government, Kenyans and East African citizens have got fast lanes to come in. Just even that feeling that you're welcome home, it doesn't cost government a lot, but makes a whole lot of psychological, emotional attachment and becomes attractive. So, yeah, but I should also add, Jonas, apart from though we've talked about the financial, the human capital is a major area, and you correctly say there's much more than the money the diasporas get back. I remember 3 years ago, the World Academy of Sciences, I think then it was still called the Third World Academy of Sciences in Trieste, Italy. They were launching a scholarly publication in terms of global publications of the world. And it turned out that African share was only 2%. And of that, 67% was only from two countries, Egypt and South Africa. So the question the participants, a number of them were asking was, how come Africa's share are so little? Where are the Rwandese professors? Where are the Kenyan doctors, the Nigerian engineers, the Ethiopian accountants? Are they not publishing? Where are the scholars? So I was privileged to raise the issue. Why don't we change the narrative? Instead of just focusing on the 2%, ask of that 98%, how much is African? Because we know for a fact that even if it's American or German or Dutch, there are African professionals who publish as well. It's said that there are more Nigerian doctors in Texas state than the whole of Nigeria. There are more Ghanaian doctors than in Manhattan City than there are in the whole of Ghana. The official U.S. Statistics Bureau data indicates that the average Kenyan born, which would loosely be the average Kenyan in the U.S., is more educated than the average American. So clearly there is that talent. And there are many examples that we could use.
Yeah, 100%.
We know about the cases of London Metropolitan Transport, where Professor Ochieng has been quite at the forefront. I remember a while back, the former president, South African President Thabo Mbeki, had 10 leading senior advisors. 4 of them were Kenyan. So, the point is there are such skill, and not only Kenyan, the other African diasporas have not even talked of the historical diasporas. The Bob Marleys and Marvin Gaye's and the like.
Martin Luther
King, President Obama, Lupita Nyong'o, and so on and so forth. Oprah Winfrey. So there's a whole lot of Africans with huge human capital that Africa could tap on.
I fully agree, but I think we kind of like cluster it, so we don't see Oprah Winfrey as a diaspora.
Sure.
But you see Lupita as a diaspora because she's Kenyan born. But that is wrong.
Right.
That is really wrong. And the fact that if you look into the powerhouse of the African American community and the $1.2 trillion that you mentioned, but also the investment capital or the amount of influencers and power power people really.
Right.
It's impressive what you can do.
That's right.
If you can, like you said, not only motivate them, but educate them, show that they're appreciated, and then get them here to get things happening. So that's the recipe.
Absolutely. I remember, Jonas, in December 2020, during our annual Diaspora Homecoming Convention, which ran alongside the first Africa Diaspora Symposium, we had for the first time very strong U.S. federal government participation. And one of the organizations that keynoted was Prosper Africa, which I came to understand brought together about 12 of the major U.S. federal agencies, ranging from USAID to Exim Bank to OPIC to DFC, Development Finance Corporation. DFC and others. DFC, understandably, was one of the smaller ones. 2 senior directors participated, and they were telling us, look, we have $15 billion for infrastructure development in Africa. What we lack is suitable vehicles. So that's opportunity that's knocking at the door. And what's more, Obviously, if you're going to get American or Chinese money or European money, chances are they would want their own nationals and companies to collaborate.
Yeah.
And what better way to even benefit from AGOA than to tap into the African-American community, because those are American nationals, both contemporary and historical, who would say, okay, you getting our funding, but work with our companies who happen to be your people.
Yeah.
So that's the gold mine that we're talking about.
No, I hear you.
Right.
I think we're finishing with that.
Right.
I want to thank Dr. Shem Ochuodho for being part of this episode.
As you do.
Yeah. I think it's been great. And I mean, we could have continued talking for hours upon hours.
Right.
But thank you so much for enlightening our community in understanding what the diaspora is, opportunities, challenges, and how we can grow together to empower the continent, right?
Thank you so much. As we do that, Jonas, allow me just to add that opportunities that together working with Pangea, Trust and others, we're doing are the events that are engaging. For example, in May, second week of May, there's going to be the 9th Afri-City Summit in Kisumu, Kenya, where the highest assembly of African leaders are expected. About 5,000 leaders, ranging from governors, ministers, to mayors from different parts of the continent will be happening. And they have a dedicated day they call Diaspora Day. But other than that, from 25th to 27th July, we'll be in Abuja, Nigeria, for the second Africa Diaspora Symposium. Again, the idea is how do we promote connection between Africa and her diasporas?
Yep.
So thank you so much for the opportunity for this. Look forward to continued dialogue and engagement.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Shem. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.